how important it is to have a physical health as a backup and foundation of all this better decision making and, definitely exercising self-regulation and having kind of that um, energy to sustain certain things down the line.
It's vitally important. And I'll say it to you like that because, in so many respects, we would look at something like a muscle and say, well, a muscle can work for a period of time, but when that muscle fatigues, it becomes, much less effective, eventually becomes painful. We really, really can push things to the point of dysfunction. Well, the brain is an organ and the brain can go through exactly the same kinds of things. So whenever we look at optimal mental, emotional state, we have to factor in the fact that we are dealing with anatomy and physiology. In other words, we're dealing with hardwiring and we're dealing with things that relate to hydration, water intake. We're dealing with vitamins and minerals because they relate very, very much to neurotransmitters. And so what we realize is the whole function within the body as a whole is likely to be substantially better when we are taking care of the physiological side of things. In other words, we're sleeping well, our diets are good in terms of they're high in nutrients, ideally with lots of the kinds of plant-based or phytonutrients that are essential for optimal function. We're talking about good physical activity, good breathing, good posture, all of these kinds of things that relate to how do I make sure that my body has what it needs to function optimally. I've said this for many years now. The body has a goal, and that is to survive for as long as possible. And the brain is a part of that, and the brain is driving a lot of that. So if we consider, and whether the figures are precise or not, you get the concept. If the brain weighs about 2% of the total body weight and yet utilizes about 20% of total daily energy, we look at that and we say, man, there's so much going on in the brain that relates to, again, dependence on energy, dependence on glucose, dependence on so many factors to keep it working at the level that it needs to work in order to rightly assess how is my environment, what are my circumstances. We live life, again, in pursuit of maximal satisfaction, pursuit and preservation, that basically is lived from a perspective of the world as it is. In other words, we live through our senses. Everything we see, everything we hear, smell, feel, taste is giving us one of two things. This is an opportunity or this is a threat. That is what we are alert to all the time. And as we navigate life, in many respects, it's on those things that we have to make decisions. And decisions are simply the function of the fact that I've got probably more opportunities than I have resources for. In other words, my mind and brain want as much as I can possibly have, and I could have it some there and some there and some there and some there, but I can't have it from all of there at the same time. So when you piece those things together, as I've just described, and then we recognize that for all of that to function well, again, I need to be having had enough water, having had enough rest, and usually feeling a sense of positivity and happiness rather than being weighed down by a sense of being overwhelmed or anxious or depressed. All of those mood states can weigh heavily on the function. The body responds to our state of mind physiologically. When we are stressed, we have raised cortisol levels. When we have raised cortisol levels, that impacts negatively on our blood sugar regulation. That impacts negatively on our immunity. So what we find is, again, to your point right at the beginning, is the better we do, the better we tend to do. And the worse we do, the worse we tend to do. So these things often build on themselves. So it's very seldom you find a person who feels wonderful in life, and yet they're not taking care of the fundamental things that relate to, again, how I eat and how I move and how I rest and how I supplement and how I provide an environment for my body to thrive. If you want your mind and brain to thrive, provide an internal environment for it to do that. And that often comes from providing an external environment for it to do that and to use it in ways that actually optimize function. So it's actually incredibly basic. It's actually incredibly simple.